Part 1. The Whisper in the Garden of Your Mind. You have always known that something was watching you, not with eyes, but with awareness. It's that subtle weight on your chest when you're alone at night. That flicker of despair that enters your heart just when you begin to believe in yourself again. That voice, quiet, persistent, familiar, that tells you you're not enough, that you've done too much wrong, that it's too late to turn back. That voice is not just your own. It never was. There is a force that once entered a man named Judas, and it did not come in with fire or fury. It came in through suggestion, a whisper, a thought, a logic that seemed so reasonable, so justified, that he believed it was his own. But it wasn't. And the same ancient whisper that entered him is seeking you not to destroy your body, but to fracture your soul from its source and leave you walking, breathing, but spiritually dead. We must ask ourselves, how does something so dark enter something so human? Judas was not born a traitor. He walked with love, with miracles, with truth itself. He saw the blind see, the dead rise, the outcast embraced. And yet he fell so deeply, so completely, that he sold the divine for silver. Why? Because the demon did not scream into Judas's ears, it reasoned with him. It gave him a story, a perspective, a justification. And so it does with us.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
When you feel the pull to betray yourself, to betray your values, your light, your higher self, it often comes dressed as logic. It tells you you've waited long enough. It says, they don't deserve your kindness. It murmurs, you must take control by any means. But how do you know it's not you? How can you distinguish your voice from the invader? That is the ancient question, and the answer is not obvious, but it is vital. The demon that entered Judas always speaks in the tone of your own mind. It never introduces itself. It enters through the back door of unhealed wounds. Do you know your wounds? Do you know what moments in your life cracked your heart open just wide enough for something dark to slip in? This is where the journey must begin, not in the heavens, but in the soil of our own story. We must dig through the layers of pain we buried long ago. The betrayals we never forgave. The guilt we never confessed. The loneliness we covered with distractions. These are not just emotional memories, they are open doors. And every open door invites something. You see, evil doesn't need to attack you when it can simply agree with your pain. It doesn't need to roar when it can echo your own inner doubts. And once you believe the echo is your own voice, you stop resisting. That's when the possession begins, not like in the movies, but in the slow decay of your willpower, the soft silence of your conscience, the numbing of your compassion. That's when you become a shell of yourself and never even realize it. Judas didn't realize it either. He thought he was doing what made sense, what had to be done, just like we do when we justify our bitterness, our revenge, our coldness. But the question we must ask is this: if the demon never announces itself, how do we know it's there? The answer is terrifyingly simple. Look at your fruits. Look at what your thoughts are producing. If your thoughts are producing fear, anger, division, despair, and self-hatred, then something has already entered you. But here's the deeper truth: we are not helpless. We are not weak. We are not victims of these whispers. We are temples, we are vessels, we are sacred ground, but only when we remember who we are. And that's the battleground the demon that entered Judas wins only when you forget. Forget your worth. Forget your light. Forget your connection to something greater. And so the battle is not out there, it is in here. Inside your thoughts. Inside your choices. Inside your silence. We must begin to recognize the patterns. Not every thought is yours. Not every feeling is truth. Not every desire is divine. You must become the watcher of your own mind. And this is not easy. It requires discipline, humility, and spiritual fire. But let me ask you something deeper. Who are you when no one is watching? What do you think about when the world is silent? That is where the demon hides. Not in your public mistakes, but in your private agreements. Do you agree with your shame? Do you secretly believe you are unworthy? That you are broken beyond repair? That you are beyond redemption? If so, then know this. That belief did not originate in the soul, it was planted. And it was planted by the same force that once approached Judas under the cloak of night. Because the ultimate goal of that force is not to make you evil, it is to make you forget you are sacred. The danger is not that you will become a monster. The danger is that you will become numb, that you will stop seeking, stop feeling, stop praying, stop caring. And when that happens, you are not possessed in the theatrical sense, you are possessed in the spiritual sense. You are no longer guided by your higher self. You are guided by a shadow that calls itself reason, survival, or even justice. But it is not love. Love never betrays. Love never sells out truth for convenience. Love never hides in the shadows. And that is how you spot the impostor by its fruits. The demon that entered Judas bore the fruit of betrayal, treachery, regret, death. What fruit are your thoughts bearing today? What is growing in the garden of your mind? This is not about fear. This is about awakening. Because if you don't see the war for your soul, you've already lost. And the war is not loud. It's silent, subtle, seductive. It speaks your language. It wears your face. It walks with you in every decision. So you must become a soldier of awareness. You must arm yourself with discernment. And above all, you must remember who you are, even when the world tries to make you forget. Remember, Judas walked with Jesus. Judas performed miracles. Judas was trusted. You can be close to the light and still fall into darkness. Proximity to truth is not protection from deception. Only vigilance is. Only humility is. Only self-examination is. Are you willing to look within, even when it hurts? Are you willing to ask, what voice am I obeying? Because here is the most haunting truth. Judas was not forced. He agreed. He chose. And we do too. Every day. In every moment. We choose which voice to follow, which whisper to believe, which thoughts to water and which to cast out. And if you do not choose consciously, the choice will be made for you. That is the nature of spiritual warfare. It is decided in your unconscious agreements. So ask yourself now, what agreement have I made with darkness? What have I said yes to without realizing it? What parts of me have become puppets to a voice that is not mine? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary, because the same demon that entered Judas wants you, not your body, not your money, not your life. It wants your surrender, your soul, your allegiance. But here's the good news. It only wins if you go quietly. It only wins if you give in without a fight. And you were not born to go quietly. You were born to roar. You were born to awaken. You were born to remember. So remember now. Remember who you are. Remember what you carry. And above all, remember that you are not alone in this battle. You are seen. You are guided. You are loved. But love does not force itself upon you. It waits to be chosen. Will you choose it? Will you rise? Will you cast out the voice that does not belong to you and reclaim the throne of your mind? This is the question, and your answer will shape eternity. Part 2. The betrayal you don't see coming. There is a betrayal more dangerous than the one Judas committed. It is the one we commit against ourselves. Not in a single act, but in 1,000 subtle choices, each one small enough to seem harmless, each one logical, each one reasonable. And yet, over time, these choices create a fracture so deep that one day we no longer recognize the person looking back at us in the mirror. That is when the demon has done its work, not by forcing you to turn against God, but by convincing you to turn against yourself. You were created to be whole, to live with integrity. But integrity, in the spiritual sense, is not about morality, it is about alignment. Alignment between your soul, your mind, and your actions. When that alignment breaks, you become divided. And when you are divided, you are vulnerable. The demon that entered Judas exploited his division, his unmet expectations, his unspoken resentment, his secret disappointment with the path he had chosen. And that same demon knows your cracks too. Where are you divided right now? Where are you saying one thing and doing another? Where are you pretending to be strong while silently drowning? These are the questions that begin to illuminate the places where the whisper has already made a home. Not because you are weak, but because you are human. And because the most dangerous lies are the ones you tell yourself. The ones that allow you to justify living below your calling. You tell yourself it's okay to stay silent when you should speak. You tell yourself it's okay to numb your pain instead of facing it. You tell yourself it's okay to settle for a life that doesn't ignite your soul. And every time you do, something ancient smiles. Because the demon doesn't need to drag you to hell, it only needs to convince you that heaven was never meant for people like you. That is betrayal. That is spiritual treason. That is what Judas did not just to Christ, but to himself. Do you understand how sacred you are? Do you realize that your soul has a destiny written in divine ink? That you were not born randomly, not a mistake, not a statistic. You are a storm wrapped in skin. You are a divine breath moving through time. But if you forget that, if you let the world define you, if you let your wounds become your identity, the demon wins. Not because it is powerful, but because it is patient. It waits for you to stop believing in who you really are. We live in a culture that celebrates betrayal, not openly, but quietly, through competition and through comparison, through the glorification of self over spirit. We are taught to chase external validation instead of cultivating internal truth. We are taught to be liked instead of being honest. And every time you betray your soul for the sake of approval, you echo the same energy that moved through Judas on that night. Because betrayal doesn't always look like silver coins, it often looks like small compromises. You compromise your boundaries. You compromise your values. You compromise your peace. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you want to cry. You stay when you should walk away. And slowly you become a stranger to yourself. That is possession. That is the silent takeover. And the most chilling part is you still think you're in control. But what if you're not? What if your thoughts are not yours? What if your self-hatred is not natural, but planted? What if your cycles of sabotage are not weakness, but manipulation? What if the demon doesn't need to scare you, it only needs to exhaust you? Because a tired soul is an easy soul to deceive. And many of us are walking through life spiritually sleep-deprived. You need to wake up. You need to remember. You need to reclaim your inner authority. Because the same demon that entered Judas is still whispering. It speaks through fear, through doubt, through shame. And it speaks fluently in your native language, your thoughts. That's why you must practice spiritual discernment like your life depends on it, because it does. When you feel the urge to react in anger, pause. When you feel justified in your bitterness, question it. When you feel overwhelmed by guilt, examine its roots. Because not every emotion is sacred. Not every thought is holy. Some are planted to destroy you from within. And you must become the gardener of your own soul. Pull out the weeds, tend to the soil, protect the roots. And yet here's the paradox: the demon only has access to the parts of you that you refuse to love. The more you hide your shame, the more power it gains. The more you deny your darkness, the deeper its grip becomes. But when you drag your shadows into the light, when you speak the truth, when you confess your doubts, when you stop pretending, that is when the spell breaks. That is when the same demon that once had you begins to lose its grip. So I ask you now, what part of yourself have you exiled? What memory do you avoid? What voice inside you have you silenced because it was too painful to hear? That's where your healing lies. That's where your battle is. And that's where the demon waits, because it knows you avoid those places. But you must go there. You must enter the garden of your own soul and confront the serpents that slither through your thoughts. This journey is not easy. It is brutal. You will cry. You will scream. You will want to give up. But on the other side is the version of you that the demon fears most, the awakened one. The one who remembers. The one who forgives. The one who refuses to be manipulated by pain. That version of you is not far away. It is waiting behind your next courageous decision to forgive, to let go, to speak the truth, to say no, to walk away, to rise. These are the weapons that cast out the whisper. Not rituals, not fear, not superstition, but truth, courage, and relentless self-awareness. You don't need to fear the demon that entered Judas. You need to fear forgetting who you are. Because Judas was not evil, he was lost. He was wounded. He was confused. And in that confusion, he allowed something else to guide him. You must not make the same mistake. You must stay awake. You must stay grounded. You must stay in communion with your soul. The battle is not outside of you. It is within. Every thought, every choice, every reaction. That is where the war is waged. And that is where you must fight. Not with violence, but with vigilance. Not with anger, but with awareness. Not with fear, but with love. Because love is the only force that cannot be imitated. The demon can mimic logic. It can mimic power. It can mimic even faith. But it cannot mimic love. Love exposes it. Love burns it. Love casts it out. So if you want to know whether a thought is from God or from the deceiver, ask yourself, does this thought lead me into love or into fear? You are the gatekeeper of your soul. You decide what enters and what leaves. But if you do not stand guard, the enemy will enter unchallenged. So stand up now. Look within. Ask the hard questions. Speak the uncomfortable truths. And remember, the same Spirit that raised the Christ also lives in you. And no demon can stand against a soul that remembers its origin. So I'll ask you again, what voice are you obeying? What whisper have you mistaken for wisdom? What fear have you baptized as truth? These questions will either free you or haunt you. The choice is yours. Part 3. The final silence before surrender. There comes a moment in every soul's life where it must stand alone. Not in isolation from others, but in confrontation with itself. That moment is not marked by thunder or fire. It's often quiet, almost too quiet. It's in the stillness after the distractions fade, after the noise dies down, after the roles we've played fall away. And in that silence you will hear it, the final whisper. The one that asks you to give up not dramatically, but subtly. Or to give up your light, to give up your calling, to give up believing that you matter. This is the last tactic of the same demon that entered Judas. It doesn't come at you with horns, it approaches with despair. It wraps itself in your memories. It reminds you of every failure, every broken promise, every time you let yourself down. And then it asks one question: who do you think you are to keep going? That is not your voice. That is the voice of the deceiver who knows it's almost lost you, and so it offers you one last lie, that you are beyond redemption. Judas believed that lie. That's why he didn't come back. That's why he didn't run to the cross. That's why he didn't fall at the feet of forgiveness. It wasn't the betrayal that destroyed him, it was the shame, the belief that he couldn't return. And that is the final trap. You may have made mistakes. You may have wandered far. You may have even betrayed yourself and others in ways you can't speak of. But hear me, you are not beyond redemption. You are not disqualified. You are not too far gone. The same Christ who was betrayed by Judas would have welcomed him back with open arms. The same light that saw Peter's denial still called him the rock. The same Spirit that hovered over the void still hovers over your chaos. But you must choose. You must choose to believe that your story is not over. Even if the world says it is. Even if religion says it is. Even if your own mind says it is. There is a deeper truth, and it is this: the demon may want you, but it cannot have you unless you surrender your permission. And yet we surrender so easily. We surrender when we numb, when we distract, when we pretend, when we perform. When we live a life that looks successful on the outside but is hollow on the inside. That is spiritual death. That is what the demon wants, not your destruction, but your disconnection. Because a disconnected soul is a powerless soul, and a powerless soul is easy to guide into darkness. So how do we return? How do we reclaim what has been lost? We do it by remembering. Remembering is the most powerful act of rebellion against the spirit of betrayal. Remember who you were before the world told you who to be. Remember the dreams you buried because they were too big. Remember the moments you felt God's presence and then convinced yourself it was just emotion. Remember how it felt to be pure, to be kind, to be open. That is who you are. That is who the demon fears. But remembering is not a passive act, it is war. Every time you choose to believe in your worth, you are at war. Every time you choose to forgive someone who hurt you, you are at war. Every time you choose to speak when silence would be safer, you are at war. And the battlefield is your mind, your emotions, your decisions. Every moment of your day is a portal either to possession or to power. You must become a guardian of your awareness. You must question every thought that enters you. You must ask, does this thought bring me closer to truth or deeper into illusion? Does this belief empower me or enslave me? Because the demon moves through lies, and lies only survive when they go unchallenged. So challenge everything that keeps you small. Challenge every narrative that makes you feel unworthy. Challenge every conclusion you've made about your life that ends in despair. The spiritual path is not about perfection, it's about presence. And presence comes through honesty. You must be honest about your addiction to comparison. Honest about the resentment you still carry. Honest about the ways you've abandoned yourself. And when you're finally brave enough to be that honest, something sacred happens. The demon loses its grip, because the demon survives in secrecy, and honesty is light. Light reveals, light heals, light expels darkness. You don't need to be a priest or a monk or a mystic to win this war. You just need to be awake. You need to care more about your soul than your image. You need to be more committed to truth and to comfort. You need to stop performing and start transforming. And that begins by asking yourself, what part of me is still pretending? Because that's where the demon hides. It hides in the version of you that smiles for the world but weeps in the dark. It hides in the part of you that says, I'm fine, when your heart is breaking. It hides in the silence after someone asks how you're really doing. And its greatest weapon is your silence. Break the silence. Speak the truth. Cry out. Scream if you must. But don't go quietly. Don't go numb. Don't go asleep. The same demon that entered Judas is not just after your actions, it's after your identity. If it can get you to forget who you are, it doesn't need to possess you. You will do the job yourself. You'll self-destruct. You'll sabotage. You'll isolate. You'll push away love, truth, grace. And you'll think it's you. But it's not. It's the ancient voice in modern language. The same lie in a new disguise. So what now? What do we do when we wake up and realize we've already let it in? We repent not in shame, but in clarity. Repentance is not groveling, it is recalibration. It is turning back to your origin. It is reconnecting the broken circuit between you and the divine. And you can do it now, right now, not tomorrow, not when you feel holy, now. You do it by saying, I remember who I am. I remember the light in me. I remember the truth I was born with. I remember the love I used to believe in, and I choose to return. That is the exorcism. That is how the possession ends, not with rituals, but with remembrance. Not with fear, but with fire. You were never meant to live in chains. You were never meant to be a slave to your thoughts. You were never meant to walk in guilt. You were made to walk in power, in truth, in love. And that power is not loud, it is steady. That truth is not complicated, it is clear. That love is not earned, it is who you are. So the next time the whisper returns, and it will, don't argue. Don't reason. Just remember. Remember that it's been using the same lines for thousands of years. And remember that you are not Judas. You are the one who wakes up, the one who returns, the one who rewrites the ending. You are the one who chooses love over fear, truth over lies, courage over comfort. The demon may want you, but it cannot have you. Because you have remembered, because you have returned, because you have chosen. And that choice will echo through eternity. Now go. Live like you know who you are. Speak like you carry fire. Walk like you are watched by angels. Love like you've already won. And never, ever forget, the same demon that entered Judas wants you, but it can no longer reach you because you've awakened.